Eating the rest of the cake if he doesn't turn up.
It goes in the bin, to tell you the truth.
Who do you talk to the most?
Reg. Reg has made the beeline in, which has literally set everything that I know now. Okay. And I've been astounded from the very beginning where Reg walked in, because from the very first time when they walked in, you know, I just sat there firstly in shock, but in awe, because they were all suited and booted how my father used to look.
Yeah.
And yeah, it took my breath away. And this was in 2004 when they first come through the door.
Yeah, I was going to say, was that back in 2004? Yeah.
So.
And that was the first. Was that the first instance? Tell me how that happened, because you briefly mentioned something earlier downstairs that they come into another conversation and
well, I was on tour.
You got the Susie coming in part.
Right. I'm on tour with my last big tour I've ever done.
Yeah.
And I had to hire someone to put the stuff out on the stage, you know, roadie and that.
Yeah.
And we were just sitting there this one afternoon where they'd put some stuff and we were having a cup of tea and just nothing, general chit chat. And this guy sat next to me, and very strongly I felt Bethnal Green in my head. It literally sounded Bethnal Green.
Had you ever been to Bethnal Green before?
No.
Have you ever heard of it?
Well, only vaguely. It wasn't somewhere, no. I've been there since.
Yeah.
But I haven't, no.
So just a feeling that come into you.
Well, I knew from my dad and what he had spoken about.
Yeah, yeah.
So I knew the name. And what had happened, this chap sat next to me, and when I said, do you have a link with Bethnal Green? He looked at me and he said, why? I said, because I do, meaning my father and his connections. And he said to me, what's your connection? And I said, it's the Krays. And he looked at me and I said, so what's yours? And he said, my uncle was Frank Mitchell.
Right, okay. And
literally, with the pair of us, we just stopped. You could feel it in the room as though something massive had happened then.
Who for the viewers, who was Frank Mitchell?
Frank Mitchell was one of the people that the Krays killed.
Right. One that we don't know that they killed, is it?
Oh no, they will admit they killed them. Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I even know where Frank's body is, because when I do murder cases, I'm out for bodies.
Really?
I'm looking for the bodies, yeah.
So yeah, the rest of that little story about they've come into your life.
So
was at what point?
The Krays.
Yeah.
Well, so with this chap who's, you know, and I'm thinking, hello, even though my management, through my life pattern, had hooked into Laurie O'Leary due to Doris Stokes.
Yeah.
Laurie was, you know, the Reg and Ron's best friend. They'd grown up together, and Laurie had a massive impact in their world. He used to go and see them while they were all banged up. Right. And he was very dependent on them, as well as the Krays being dependent on him to do whatever was asked, you know.
Yeah.
And Laurie had an amazing clientele list, roughly, in the showbiz world. And he ended up bringing a lot of them into the clubs that they owned.
Really? Oh, yeah. Was that how they got to sort of mingle?
That was Laurie's He was an amazing promoter, and he was a lovely man, and yeah, I'm glad he walked across my path. Taught me loads of stuff to do with the entertainment world.
And then that's when obviously you said, was it Reggie or Ronnie come in to your head and said...
Well, no, what happened where this guy came round to my house to have a cup of tea, and Frank walked in all on his own, right in front of me, and I said, your uncle's here. And Frank literally just delivered a message to his nephew, and that was it. And I didn't think too much of it. I thought it was a normal thing for me to have a, you know, dead person wander in.
Yeah.
And that was that. And then a few days later, we were sitting in the theatre again. He's around with this guy, and Frank turns up again with some of his family, gives another message across to his nephew. And then out the corner of my eye, I could see these two men walking towards me. And then all of a sudden, Frank moved to the right, and right in front of me come Reg and Ron. And Reg bent down and looked at me and went, hello, Susie. And I can't tell you, because I was in such shock.
I bet you was.
And my mouth, well, you can see even right now, when I think back, it stunned me. I was stunned. And he said to me, Reg, they both asked me how I was, right? And, you know, I'm trying to find the words to talk back to them, thinking, what the hell are you doing here? And Reg just said, we want you to do something for me. And I went, what's that? And he said, we're going to tell you stuff. We want you to go out to the world and tell it. Right. And I went, no, I can't do that. And so Reg never stopped talking for a whole week.
What, just to get you to do it?
Yeah, really? Over and over again. And I couldn't do anything. And
what, sort of driving you mad?
Well, no, he'd just come in the day and then go again. And I just could not do it. Couldn't do it in any which way. I said, how am I going to run out with this? You know, this is something else. And roughly what happened there, they disappeared, and I thought, thank God for that.
What,
they're gone. That was in 2004.
Yeah.
They turned up again in 2007.
Okay.
Same story, same line.
Really?
Everything.
The same thing?
Same thing. Please do it for us. No. Didn't want to know, didn't want to know. And it went on near enough every other year. They'd turn up, say the same thing. So when I got to 2017... my life was in a different place, because after all the things that I do, I knew if I gave Reg and Ron the time of day with this, it would take time to, firstly, to really listen to what they wanted to say. And secondly, because of the enormity, I had to pass it through the big wigs here.
Right.
To how I'm going to manage this, because of what they're going to say. Because... in reality, as we sit here as humans, if you commit murder or any form of crimes, how it's set up here, there's heaven and hell, right? It's coming from religion. That's the belief pattern on humanity.
Yeah, yeah.
In reality of it, there is no such thing. So you're not going into hell, which Spirit knew. She knows so much how it all works now. So where I'd done these murders and had seen, I'd been given privilege to be able to walk into where you go when you die. And on that had never been done before. No. So they were relaying what happens to us all once we die in different ways than the world could ever imagine. And so... where mediums had sat and still do sit, they can only go to the door. They can say your folks are in the spirit, but they do not know what happens to them when you die. You
said earlier that there was like another path to this.
Right, so because I've done 60 years in this, from the very early stages when I came into it, I could see that nothing added up, right?
Yeah. If
I just took Red Cloud, not realising who Red Cloud actually was in life when he was alive here, I put it to them and I said, so can you explain to me how this man can come and stand at my side, bearing in fact that in his life he led the whole of the Lakota Sioux, which was massive, right? Nation after nation of Sioux Indian.
Right.
And on them, they killed thousands upon thousands, if not millions, of other Indians that were on the plains and in America, as well as when the white man turned up there, right?
Okay.
So can you explain to me, literally, how this works when you're telling me there's no hell?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
When they're being the chief of all of this and killed all this, and here he stood. All in his, and not only that, he was leading the whole of the spiritualist movement.
Yeah.
And of course,
yeah.
there wasn't one of them that could explain it at all. So I knew on that straight off something was terribly wrong here. Second thing was, can you explain to me how I work? And the mediums would say, well, you get stuff. And I'd go, okay, but where am I getting my information from? Well, you get it from the dead, don't you? Right. So the dead come to talk to me, as they do all mediums across the world.
Yeah.
Fine. So where do the mediums and the information that the dead are getting, where is that coming from? Well, they just know, don't they? So I'd go, so how do they know? And then they go, well, it's in the air. A lot of them said it was in the air. A lot of them said, well, it was written, it's in your soul. So then the next big question was, so what is soul?
Right, yeah, of course, yeah.
Right, and they'd go, well, it's you, isn't it? You know, and I go, so, but where has the soul come from? Right, so, and then the next big question.
I bet they loved you, didn't they?
Well, I used to get thrown out of everywhere.
Yeah, I bet, yeah.
I mean, literally, nobody wanted me there at all because they all knew she was pressing the right buttons.
Yeah.
And you will see the religious as well as the spiritual world are all in denial of everything here because there's no proof.
What was the next step on that then?
So the next big thing was, which I still do today when I do teaching, one of the first biggest questions I say to people, maybe you guys can answer it, is you tell me where the soul lies within your human form. Where would you think it is?
Well, it's got to be, it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's got to be up inside your head, surely, because that's where everything starts from. Or your heart, one of them two.
Chakras, what are they called?
No.
Your what?
Chakras. Yeah.
They're energy fields.
Oh, right.
No.
Oh, you've been looking up a few things.
These are simple things that they should know out there, and they know nothing. And when I realised these are people that are actually okay just to talk to a dead person, not knowing where they'd come from, realising that the dead were coming through not saying what I had expected the dead to say, which should be, when they walk through the door, I'm Joe Bloggs, I used to live at 123 wherever, right? This is what I died of, this is what my family consisted of, and this is what's happened to me in my life. And you'll see right across the board, mediums were getting so little on it all, and I couldn't figure out why that was. Because you're a dead person, you know who you are, you've lived your life for 80 odd years hopefully, and you know who you are. And none of that was coming in. I expected, and still do today, some of the big stuff I was realising. I have this thing with me, I listen to everything. I have this thing since a kid, I watch everything, and I could see right across the board the dead were not coming in firstly and saying to the people, the public, the individual person, you really want to be here, this is fantastic where I am, full stop. Right. Fantastic. They are meant to be in heaven, right? That's what's told to us where we're going. So why aren't the dead walking through the door going, oh my God, Wait till you get here.
Yes, she's beautiful.
Yeah. And so none of that was coming in. So what I started doing, I started trying to grab the newbies, which are the ones that have just died, hanging on to their human bit to give it me back to what they were seeing.
Right.
So what I got back, I asked them loads of questions, and it consisted of, have you met God? Can you see a God? Is there a God? And then the answer was no.
Really?
Yeah. So then it was, have you seen Jesus? Is there a Jesus? Is there any holy masters there? No.
No again?
Yeah. So then it went to, okay, so have you seen any angels? Anything winged like that? No. Okay, so then I moved it and I said, so what else can you see? And then on that, this is when the whole thing lifted for me, because Red Cloud had warned me, and he said to me, Susan, if you go down this pathway, you're going to go into what we would class as annihilation, because the information is so profound, it's all hidden from human man, and it's only for the elite and the elites who are in it to know what really you're all about here as humanity, and where you're all going and where you've all come from.
Yeah.
And so Susan said, okay, let's go for it. And that's where I ended up. Yeah, wow. I thought, what could they show me that I didn't would be any bigger than what I was seeing, you know?
I'm all ears.
And off Susan ran. And oh my God. And I've been doing that since the 80s. And I have got wealth of stuff to do with how we live here, why we're here, and what's going to happen to you when you die.
I'm intrigued. Why?
We are a race of beings which were created as a slave race, full stop.
That's all we do is work. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
From the very beginning of a race of beings coming here for looking for workers. They brought about the evolution of us, creation came in. So where you've got Adam and Eve and all that in the Bible of the Holy Scriptures, some of it is true. So what the elite had done for humanity, they'd allowed some of the truth out, but because you don't know what you're reading and where the timeline runs on it all, you could never piece it together. So where the truth of us sit, a very long time ago, thousands of years, in the creation of us, we were created from what you will know as a race that came here to mine here, and they came for a certain reason for their own planet. And by bringing in their own force, there wasn't enough workers, so they started to create a new existence which came to be as us. And so this is where humanity was born, and was born without what you would know as soul, without any form of creation. It was just as a robotic sort of robotic form where you would do the deed, and that was that. And so what happened then, once that was done, they left, took their workers back, and then as you'll read it in scripture, you will see and hear about, which is called the fallen angels. So the fallen angels are what is classed as the Elohim, and the Elohim remained here teaching human man and woman what they needed to know. Right. So you've had an original source, so where you'll see, as it's written in scriptures, there are the pure bloods, which as you've gone back through history, you'll see them as the Hebrews, which now are the Jews. They've always been the chosen ones, and they still are today. And this is why throughout of all of their existence, they've always been persecuted due to this one fact, that they hold and still hold within them this pure essence of what they class as divinity, to be able to return into heaven, the real heaven, and have everlasting life. Full stop.
Right, okay.
You and I are only entitled to eternal life. So when I've asked the world and the people, tell me the difference, you didn't know. You thought it was the same thing, and it's not.
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where that's moved on to, you've got the fallen angels then taking control over humanity, where 3 of these angels slept with human women. That changed the DNA. That was the reason, and from that very thing, you've got your lives as you have. This is why you're born to die, and you have this live, die, repeat thing, and not everlasting life anymore.
And work in between all that as well.
Yeah. And so amongst it all, you have an existence where roughly you are living a life going nowhere, because everything that you have and can do here in this life pattern, you're going to have to give it up on death. And that's the difference between what we are today, because we are not, by changing the DNA, you are not entitled to anything. So where this came into, what these black watchers are known as, that are in the earth, this is the lot that created the elite to control the outside, to control what's out there. And that carries on right the way through history. So you've had 2 tribulations. So as it's written in Revelations, it's written as the tribulation would happen, the rapture would happen, and it would take the righteous ones off the earth. So you've got the original lot that have gone already. Thousands of years ago, they came. So on the planet, or on the world that we sit on, it's not like you see it when you see it as this. It's split into 3 parts.
Right, yeah.
And it's split into 3 parts due to everything that happened on the first tribulation. And that was all due to Lucifer. Because Lucifer, what we are sitting on, he owns it, it belongs to him. This is why where you're walking in the here and now, you are having all the satanic stuff surfacing right to the top, because this is his control world. This is where all the agenda stuff's coming in.
Well, everyone can recognise that name, can't they, straight away?
Well, Lucifer, they control worlds. So where we sit today, there is our world sitting on a planet. Our world, Earth, is not a planet.
Yeah, it's just sitting there. We sort of rent the space, don't we?
No, there's a bit more to that. But where the DNA shifted and the retribution happened, it's happened twice. So when I've been working in all of this, all the archaeologists, big archaeologists, have realised on the timeline, which has never been spoken about in any form of the spiritual lot, because when they're working to talk to a dead person, they're just taking it from what's coming in. So they don't know who they actually are. They're just being told who they are. And there's 2 massive things that I found out within the spiritual world. Firstly, that none of them know about the code, because we are all coded. They've never been taught how to enter into the code, to know everything about you, how they find you, how everything works here, full stop, how the vaccine program works all on it, full stop, and how everything that the elite have ever wanted to do and still will do is all running through on your bloodlines. So the massive thing sits on a code that they know what they can keep here and they know what they can get off the planet. And that's where the vaccine program was produced and is still working today.
Still working today,
yeah. And it works all on, which is 5G. They've created 6G. They're working at 7G at the moment.
Yeah, it's all going
so
forward,
where
isn't
you've
it?
got all the change of the DNA, this is what has been left. So it's happened twice. I think the religious lot are expecting it to happen again, and the righteous ones to be saved, but they ain't going to happen at all. Not whatsoever. So where you are sitting, you are looking at what was left behind. And
Very true,
what humanity is what was left behind. And because of that, that's how the Black Watchers have been able to take over humanity here and control the world that they're sitting on.
That does go very, very deep, doesn't it? It's a different look on life completely.
All proven.
Yeah.
All of this is proven.
It just you don't.
Yeah.
It's not the normal sort of thing you hear.
No, because all of this stuff, in all of this line of work, right the way throughout history, you would have always got somebody like me against a big leader. Always.
Right.
The Russians are so far advanced in it, unbelievably. They were, and always have been, paramount in this. Never will do anything unless they use this. For reasons being, they can be ahead of the game of every single thing. The Hadron Collider, which is in Switzerland, has two massive machines in it, and they have created time travel. Right? So us elite lot who work within it can already do this. We've trained to do it. So where we sit now, when I talk to people who are mediums, and I ask them one basic thing, and I ask them what is their greatest thing they've got, they will tell me it's talking to a dead person, which it never is. And you'll see that the elite never ever want to talk to a dead person, because the dead know nothing. Because once you're dead, you're cut off from it all. Right, and unless you enter into this frequency code of this here, they won't pick up any information.
So the messages that they send over to the mediums, I mean, I watched the medium the other day, Sally Cudmore. She said, come down to one of my meetings, and I went there, and she went from one corner to the other corner, and everything she said to these people, only short little things about their past relatives, was bang on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you've either got a room full of people paying money just to be there as
that's how it goes. But
it's actually true.
That's been the biggest con of it all.
But you know,
because you could ask her how she does it, and she will not know.
Oh, I'm going to get her on. I am going to get her on.
Okay, she will say that she talks to dead, and the dead will know where it's coming from. Right.
Right. Yeah. She's too bang on. She was too specific.
We all are. But it's a case of that's not how it's all set up.
Right.
It's set up in a way that you're living in what is not real. You're living in a reality that they've placed here so that you would go along with their plan of action, that you would toe the line, that you would be born into an existence of dying. And that's exactly what happens to you. So that you have no control over anything, that your freedom has gone, and it's gone from that very first existence when the DNA changed. And since then, humanity has been scrabbling out to try to free itself. Yeah. So where all the archaeologists have come in and the historians that I've worked on, we've noted on the timeline massive things, because the timeline in this, no matter who the mediums are on the world, they will not know anything about the code, because the dead have shut it down to the channels to a level that you're not privy to have that information.
Right.
You're not privy to be able to walk into where the dead go.
Okay. Is there like a pattern that emerges so you can see what stuff's going on from past going forward?
On the timeline,
yeah.
The elite, the one thing the elite do, they stick to a program, right? Everything has to be written and signed off and can never be changed. So even if I just took you, right, so you descended into life, mum and dad got together one night and here you come, yeah? Mm-hmm. That's how you think it sits, because that's how humanity will see it. Yeah. But you've been orchestrated long before that. Right. So I can get souls that are waiting to come, even if mum and dad haven't got together. Right. So this is why you get a 12-year-old who has a baby, and you'll get a 67-year-old woman that can fall pregnant. So it's orchestrated in this massive code shift.
Does that also account for when people think they've been here before? Reincarnation?
The reincarnation and the karma is a massive thing, right? Yeah. The karmic thing falls into what they've told you, where you're going to live, die, and then get repeated back Yeah?
Right.
What they haven't told you is that you have one life only. You are always you, and what happens to you, they ping it back time after time after time. So me and you, darling, have sat here probably for thousands of years talking on this because you are stuck in your timeline, and so am I. You cannot move from it. It does not go. You cannot exist in another one, and everything you are is here. And all they keep doing is this.
And how do I look? Am I all right?
Well, this is why you every time, this is where evolution comes in.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what
So
we're
every
evolving,
time
isn't
you
it?
move into that timeline and you're set in, you will know things. You will call it deja vu.
That's it, yeah, that's what
Right?
I've come to, yeah.
It's because something in your code will ping. And you'll know you've been here before.
Everyone has that. Everybody says that same thing as
and
well.
that is because you're walking on the same bit of time. You don't get to go into the future and you don't get to go in the past. That's why in history today
you
they've
always
been
see
making...
what happened before. You always see what happened.
If,
so it
right,
goes
if you
back
were
a little
if you
bit.
were reincarnated, if you'd come in through another timeline, there would be no need for them to create time travel, because they could bring in the human with the information in the code. Right, so that doesn't happen. So what's happened here in massive science, they've created time travel. And so where you've got the Hadron Collider, two massive machines there, it's all created, all done. I'm able to do it. I've done it with a load of elite stuff where I can walk. Reg has took me back into the 60s. I've been around there. I've been around Esmeralda's barn. He's done that for me. And it's been astounding. You're not allowed to touch anything, to change anything. But what happens here, they've made it to an extent where if you can perform time travel, then you can control the future of humanity. And that's all that they've ever wanted to do. It's never been about talking to a dead person, because the dead have nothing to tell you. Once you are dead, you're done.
Right. You can just relay back messages.
You go off to sleep, darling. All right? You go off to sleep. And unless there is a reason why they wake you up, you will see within the first few days of your departure from this world to the next, there is very little that will happen to you. I've walked in there with the dead to see actually what happens, and it is reported what you will do with your conscious mind, how the program works when you drop down dead. This remains the same. They do not shift it for a bit of time, so that you will all know that you have the light coming in towards you, and most of humanity will step into the light. Yeah, that is the worst place you want to be. Reasons being that the world we live on is known out there as a prison planet now, and you are walking into another prison part of your existence on your code, and all that happens, they are just slowing it down to take control of you and put you in a holding. So that's where that is.
So the ones that come back, like one of your Reggie, you say you've got them, he sits in the seat downstairs, so they've come back and they've obviously not gone through that light.
Yeah, they've gone in there. They can't manoeuvre themselves from where they are. They've had to have, in respect, it signed off. I mean, where Reg came in, he used the hook, as a lot of the dead will do, to someone else. So like Alan, who was in the show with me, putting the bits out, he was the hook. Right?
Okay.
I hadn't got anyone closer apart from Laurie, and I hadn't seen Laurie for quite some time. So what they did, he was the hook to her. We'll use Frank, let Frank come in to talk to his nephew.
Yeah.
We'll use that and we'll come in behind it. And you'll find a lot of the dead will do that. If they can get a foot in, they'll get a foot in. But you'll see the dead can't sit here because of the frequency code. because when you go into the light, what happens to you? It's like a computer, right? And if you bring the laptop down on the lid of a computer, it's still going, but there's nothing on the screen. It's dead, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens to you. So they're still vibrating. So unless they get a shot, or I lift the laptop and I'm after somebody over there, nobody will surface. Don't need to. Stay away. That's how it is. And they're very well ruled. So all this stuff that you will get here, like you said earlier, to do with your hauntings, it's all to do with the code. So what happens to humanity here? You leave your imprint behind. So you put your hand on that glass and you'll leave your handprint. And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's
Makes
the attraction. So once you attach to a bit of an energy source, you'll draw them in, full stop. But you'll see 99% of whatever's left here is mostly family. It's somebody that just wants to talk, just to say, normally, I'm still alive. Because you'll see 99% of humanity still don't believe in the afterlife. And once you become a dead person, that's the first thing you want to say, hey, I'm still alive. And so for 60 years, I've sat talking to the dead to help the living come to terms with that they are okay, whomever you have lost. And there is going to be some way in the future of your existence you will see your loved one again.
Absolutely fascinating stuff, and we're quite, it's things that I've never heard of before, and really interesting. I said that I was really interested in this. But if we go back to what we spoke about before with the Krays, we did sort of have a little mention that I've got a little few questions for them to ask, and you did say to me you're going to ask them questions because you want to make sure that they're here. And you said that Reg is
here.
I've sat down.
Yeah.
He's got a favourite chair in your house.
Reg comes 24/7 when he chooses to. He's got a bit less lately, right. But yeah. So for 6 years, he was 24/7, literally every single day. And in respect to Reg, I had to get to know Reg. I had to see how he ticked now.
Yeah.
And when they first came through the door, they had stepped back into the timeline of themselves. They thought that they could do it just as it was in the 60s. And so the manipulation was horrendous.
Yeah.
And so the rows that we had, and I told them to go over and over so many times, I can't deal with this.
Do you speak out loud to
Oh, yeah,
You have a proper conversation?
Yeah, proper conversation.
So where is he, just for instance now, where is he now? Is he next to you, standing next to you in the hallway?
He was in the hallway a minute ago, but he'll come and stand next to me.
Okay, well we did have a little...
Reg, do you want to come and talk to him?
We've got a couple of little... They're just a couple of little questions that have always sort of... not mystified me, but just need a couple of things that need answering. Like when they done there's certain things they did in life, like with Jack the Hat and George Cornell. What was their chain of thought with the repercussions? Surely, they were very clever guys. They were both clever, both very, very smart, had a lot of money, a lot of business, good business head. Doing what they'd done, they must have known that it was going to be a prison sentence. Where was the chain of thinking that... you could have got someone else to do that. Why did you go and do it?
Right, okay. First thing, where Reg and Ron sit, their whole mentality was to get out of one thing that they were born into, which was poverty. And something happened to them very early on in the Second World War when they'd run to... I think it was Bethnal Green Station to hide where it was, one of the air shelters, and a bomb went off, and it hit them so much hard that two little lads, I think they were 10, something like this, that life was very thin on the ground, and you were here one moment and gone the next. And Reg told me that instilled within them so strongly that they knew no matter whatever they did in life, no, they were untouchable. And it was from there.
That was from my next question.
It was the fact that they was whatever had gone off so close to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the horror of it, it set
them off. So
yeah,
that's like a trigger.
Yeah.
So it was that trigger of untouchability. You know, you're untouchable.
Yeah.
You felt untouchable. And did that go on throughout their sort of whole life? Everything didn't matter. The police didn't matter. The arresting didn't matter. Going to prison didn't matter. They just felt it won't happen to me. Won't happen to me.
From what I know, a lot of the stuff between the two of them, these two, they are very unique in a way where they're wound with each other. I know they're twins, but there is something quite odd between them where they literally they're in each other's presence. They literally are two individuals but are as one. And they're thinking, they're being, it's as though everything they would do. So what seemed to have occurred, how Reg talks it, is that they set out not to become who they became, but set out to get themselves out of the poverty, to get some money, to get their mum out of London into like a suburbs and that sort of thing, to get a better way of life. And what seems to have happened, which happens to all of us, things were put in their path and they were born. And it seems that they didn't seem to have to try too hard. Things just fell in their pathway. And Reg said it was quite unbelievable at times. At the time, bearing in mind they were coming out of the Second World War, bearing in mind there was a lot of criminal stuff that had obviously happened in the Second World War, you know, all the black market and all that jazz, and they just picked up from it and ran. So it didn't seem to be this was bloody effort. And I think when you look at it, and I've looked at it loads of time, I laugh because it is laughable, because in respect you can see that their life pattern was set just like ours are. They were meant to go that way, and
this stuff happens
and it's all been shown and dropped itself in, and they've just gone for it.
There's been a lot of questions asked by a lot of people on our channel as well, and I'm quite fascinated by this question myself. But what happened to the Krays money? What happened to it after, obviously, they went in prison, they sort of died in prison? What happened to all that money? Where did it go?
Right, as far as the money, Reg has told me there wasn't any money.
Really?
Yeah. He told me that, actually it was Francis, because I've spoken to Francis quite a bit. In the time of them, they used to have 3 safe deposit boxes.
Right.
And in there was what he said was gold. Gold in lots of different ways, stuff that they had on lots of people, footage they had on people.
What, bad stuff or stuff they could, what's the word? That's the word I'm looking for. Oh, not corrupt them with. That, blackmail.
Yeah,
they can
exactly,
blackmail them with. So they had all that sort of stuff.
All this.
Right, okay.
So Francis told me that within it all, the stuff was rife. So in their life, Reg and Ron were attached to, as well as criminal people, important people.
Yeah.
So in Ron's flat, you had people where they had loads of stuff on them, from Brian Epstein being the Beatles manager.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know, but they were the money behind the Beatles. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, no.
Yeah, he did say that they did consider the Stones at one point, but there was other bands as well they'd stuck their money into. Also, you're too young to remember this, but Christine Keeler, do you remember all of that, where she brought the government down due to hokey pokey stuff in, you know, being as a cool girl, and used to go into the clubs as well. Okay. So Stephen Ward, who was set up by the government and took the hit for it all, used to go into their clubs. So they had tons of stuff all to do with the government stuff and the people in there. And of course Stephen Ward committed suicide over it all, which was really sad, because he was definitely set up. So, and then you've got like where Ron and the photograph was taken where he was with the dear old Lord, and all the money that he got paid and all that was hushed up. But where Reg said there was money. The money was in what they regarded as what they would divulge to the world. So where Reg was 33 years in prison, he knew he wasn't going to get out. So when Ron died, he set about finding a way out in his life pattern, looking good to the world, where if he'd set himself up to look reasonably okay by getting himself a wife, the probation board would think he's moving towards being able to be rehabilitated to coming out, So these were the reasons behind it, he tells me. What he did say he was going to do, what is left and was left, was a load of footage that he had tons of stuff to do with the Die in the Doors parties. They had loads of stuff. They filmed loads of stuff that he said he would divulge. All the paperwork, all the names that were mentioned in the courts, which were all and are still sealed up, he was going to name names to get himself out of the prison.
Really?
Yeah.
So
this is all in Harold Wilson's time.
Blimey, Harold Wilson.
Yeah,
right,
so he had one of them in Harold Wilson's parliamentary lot. They had one of them in his pocket.
So the next question will be then, not so much what happened to all the money, what happened to all the gold? Where is all that gone? Because someone must be hiding out, got rid of it, or where is the gold?
Reg told me that's all gone.
It's all gone, so no one can find that, no one can get that out, and nothing could be sort of...
He did tell me there was gold in there, and I have asked him several times, and he said there wasn't anything.
Did they feel untouchable from the start, from the very start?
I think as two young lads, they took everything on the chin. He still does take everything on the chin. It looks as though they've walked through their life with no regret. Right. Everything that they've ever done, no matter how big it's been, he said to me, Sue, if you're going to do this, you've got to own it. He said, you can't walk into this and not own it. He said, so this is why they've never whinged and whined, ever.
Yeah, they haven't,
And he said, and to this very day, never have whinged and whined. It doesn't even come into them. They are dead straight. We're dead straight with what they did here. It either worked or it didn't, and if it didn't work, they'd move on to the next. They would never give anything a great deal of time. They were constantly moving on to new stuff. Yeah,
and what about the money? Having the money, obviously having all that money, did it give them all the power in the world?
Oh, that's a question. I know. In the living, he would have said yes. In the spirit now, no, because money can only go so far.
Yeah.
He lost a lot. Ron, in his mental health, Ron, if he'd been alive today, probably could have been at home with medication.
Right,
and I think Reg had said to me, even when he was in Broadmoor, they were hoping that at some point he was going to be able to come home at some point, even, when their mum was alive and that. Ron still hasn't changed a great deal where he is in the spirit. And this is something that also is never taught to any form of channel mediums out there. Right. You do not know what happens to you, no matter what your life is, to what happens to you when you go through. So all of that needed to be spoken about, which has been all a closed off thing. So where the two boys have sat, where Reg sat, honest to God, he would never have killed Jack. He had no intentions to go and kill Jack. The reason why Jack ended up like he did is because Jack said the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And Reg was, and both of the boys were living lives of denial, and both of them are gay. Reg is not bisexual at all, they're both gay.
Right.
And Reg said to me the reason why it looked like, well, he did sleep with women because he wanted to give his mum some grandkids, full stop.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Right, so in and amongst it, where Reg sits now, in what he's told me, that he fathered 5 children. 3 of them were terminated.
Right.
He has a daughter and he has a son.
Okay.
And he is a great-grandfather now.
And that's, who are they?
Well, the boy...
never been spoke of?
The boy comes from in the early, I think it's the really early 60s. Francis knew of him.
Okay.
And the girl, I think, came a little bit later in the 60s. The girl, the daughter, I think, has gone to see him once or twice.
Oh, right.
And he has a regret with that. He's spoken that he felt at the time it wasn't the right time for him, if ever there's a right time. But now where he's looking back, you can see a lot of things.
So did Violet get her grandchildren? She didn't, obviously, then. Cause
she did. Well, she had one.
She got one, yeah, but
Yeah.
obviously they didn't see each other, or did they?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, Charlie gave her a grandson, but Gary died. He died of cancer. So that was the end of that, roughly.
So in their reign, what one of the questions a lot of people have been asking again is, how were they perceived by other gangs? How was, what was their sort of relationship with the other gangs? Were they feared the most? Was they sort of on the same par, on the same level?
Are you feared, Reg? You want to come in and talk on this? Let's see if I can bring him in for you. Oh, here he comes. He's just told me to say to you. He says to say hello to you.
Hello. Thank you for your
He
time.
says to say that you're asking prominent questions here.
Yes.
And he says he doesn't want to do you an injustice. And he said, Susan, what does he want to ask? So I'll ask you a question again.
How were you perceived by other gangs? What was your relationship with other gangs? Were you feared? Was you on the same?
He's told me to say that in the time of them, right back in there, in the late 50s, 60s, the gangs were 2 a penny, and they were something and nothing, and it was all about the territory and where you stepped. He said, and if you didn't step out of your territory, you were fine. He said, but going over the margin of it into someone else's, he said that everybody knew there would always be retributions of some kind, and they expected that. So where the retributions came in, it was either a state of a punch-up, or somebody would set upon someone else. And he said, and that would do it. He said, but where the exchanges of funds and money were, and who stepped into one department of owning something, of like, if you were doing a deal, if you stepped onto somebody else's toes or territory that way, he said then more or less there were guns around then, or the knives would be pulled out. He said, and there was a lot of knife stuff back in the day there.
Yeah. Like you used to lead? Did they lead and others followed? Or did they sort of...
They didn't, at the time of it, it was not looked at that. It was only in the later years of their life, when they look back, they could see somehow in what they'd come. The fear came about all to do with what you would class as bullying now.
Yeah.
How they threatened people, or felt, the people felt threatened.
Yeah.
But he said he didn't think, no.
What was the biggest achievement? Oh, that's a tough one. There could be quite a few on that.
The biggest achievement for him was when he was in prison letting go.
Right, okay.
He said, because when everything comes to a head, when your freedom is taken from you, it's letting go, otherwise you don't survive. And I'm in awe at how they survived 30 years in there.
Yeah, well, that's a long time. Very long time.
So when Reg first came in, even though he was talking on a murder, he said to me, I don't want to talk about the past. And I thought, well, we're not going anywhere then, are we? Okay. That's that then, that's done and dusted. And it's taken me a long time to get him to go back onto the timeline to see the stuff. And that's where I brought Francis into it. That's where I brought Jack into it, because Jack's come in to talk to me, and also Frank again.
Yeah.
So Francis had a lot to say on them. because she was in it at the time. And between the two of them, it's such a sad individual, because I swear if Frances hadn't killed herself, Reg would never have killed Jack.
I found that an interesting fact. Sorry to jump in there, but when you said about Frances obviously killing herself, apparently that wasn't the first time, was it?
No, it was the third time.
Third time, yeah.
Reg used to pay out, and she used to go and have, back in the day, it was electric stuff.
Yes,
what do they call it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know you mean.
They've done away with that now, thank God.
Yeah.
But she's had 2 of that, and he took her to the hospital once, and she just wouldn't go in on one of them. So the girl, from Frances's perspective, it's sad. It's so sad, because I know he loved her, but he should have been true to her. He should have told her the truth. They'd have never got married. It was marriage waiting to hell, going into hell, actually.
And is he with?
No,
he's not with her now.
No, God,
in spirit.
No,
is he with Mum or Violet? Or are both of them, Ron and Reg, with Mum now and Dad in spirit?
I've spoken to Violet. Violet, being a mum myself, I've said to Violet, how could you have not known about your boys?
Right.
Right. Now, I've got 5 sons, and I know what she said to me, Susan. She said, you know, with your boys, and all mums are the same, right? You tend to look the other way. And I went, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I said, but you must have known when you were sitting in that court that some of this stuff was theirs. And she said to me, she knows now. And so when Ron went through, Ron was collected by his mum, and he remains with his mum, full stop. Yeah. That's where he is.
Yeah.
Ron did tell me sometime after it, he did say that there was a boyfriend of some kind around him, but that's all he would let me know. Reg is not with Frances. Frances hates his guts.
Okay.
And they still have a lot to get through, these 2. She will never forgive him for her being in her wedding dress, being laid to rest. Right. And when the very first time I met Frances, she come in screaming and shouting at me, and shouting and saying, look at me, Susan, look at me. And in front of me was this young woman in a white wedding dress.
Wow.
And he was stood at my side, Reg, and I just let them go at each other. And between the 2 of them, they've settled down a lot more than they were when they first started coming in together.
Yeah.
But she's told the truth on Reg and the life. If Reg had been honest with himself, he would have been a whole lot happier instead of having to hide everything. Yeah. And Reg seems to have led a life being stuck in the middle with Ron. He said to me he vowed never ever to come again as a twin.
Right, okay.
Never. And that was Reg's life. He was the meat in the sandwich all the time, trying to stop Ron doing stuff.
Yeah.
Trying to rectify all the mistakes.
Okay.
And trying to go out there as a businessman and owning clubs, because that's roughly what he wanted to do. And this other side, this criminal side, I think where Reg was, he was quite happy to leave it if he'd been given the opportunity. Mm. And when he stood in the call, and I said to him, why didn't you tell him about, because he'd done nothing to do with Frances, all went in, and so he was like a little volcano waiting to go off there. And of course, instead of just saying to the call, I'm under this massive stress because my wife's just committed suicide, he didn't. And I've said to him, and he said he would never have done that to Ron, for Ron to have gone down more than he would have got.
Last question, and this is one that everyone's dying to know, but what sort of crimes did they take to the graves with them?
Oh, how long have we got? Right.
As long as you
There's
like.
lots of stuff.
I mean, that's a personal question,
right.
If you're able to say.
Okay. I've asked Reggie if I could talk on stuff here because I had to get it past him.
We did speak about this, didn't we? Yeah.
Because otherwise I wouldn't utter a word. Okay. Firstly, they hung someone.
Right.
Which was never told of.
Never told of, okay.
They killed 2 rent boys.
Yeah.
Strangled them.
Okay. That was never told of either. Obviously, this is all stuff that's never been heard.
Yeah. Also, while Reg was in prison, he said to me he wanted to put his hands up that while he was in prison, he had raped someone.
Oh.
Right.
Is he asked to say have that said?
Yeah, he said that. And he'd also said that even though there was material, but I don't know what the material, if it's written stuff, what it is, to say he hadn't. He wants, from where he's standing now, to put his hands up to owning it. Because when you become a dead person, you have to own it.
Okay.
Right, you can't hide it. In life, you can go to prison with your sins of whatever you've done.
Yeah,
but you can push it down. It don't exist anymore. Once you go through, it all surfaces. And for him to clear the decks for himself, this is why he's doing this with me.
Yeah.
He has to set himself free.
Will this help do that?
This is massive. This is for him to free himself from what they were. Because the one thing that they, both of them, could not get over is why they're still talked about. They have no idea.
Really?
No idea whatsoever.
Still massive.
Yeah. And it deludes them because they will put their hands up. They accept they are murderers. Right. There is at least 8 they have done themselves without the hits.
Without the hits?
Yeah.
When you say the hits, are these ones
the hits is where people would come and either ask something of them and others would be sent out from them to do something.
Oh, right, I see. Yeah, I gotcha.
Right? Yeah. So that's how they regard it.
Yeah.
So on one of the hits that he told me about, which was one of the first things he spoke on, was to do with a boxer. So he said, Sue, I need you to tell the world this because we're doing it for one reason only, because of the victims of what's gone on here. These women need to be laid to rest and their story told. And he said, so this is what happened. So apparently back in the day, there was this famous boxer who I'd never heard of because it's way back in the day. His name is Freddie Mills. Yeah. And apparently he was a heavyweight boxer with a belt of some kind back in the day, who also himself apparently had a bit of fame of some kind. I don't know how, but whatever. And Reg said that because he used to come in and out of their clubs, the Krays clubs, he fancied getting his own club, and apparently somehow he managed to do this. But also at the same time, this Freddie Mills was getting himself into a load of trouble with money, or didn't have enough money, and somehow also he was offered some TV work in something or other, Reg said. He said, but what we had noticed, the girls, the prostitutes, the escorts that were coming in and out of the clubs were saying within their clubs that Freddie Mills was getting very violent when he was having sex with these girls, and that they were becoming scared. Right. And so it was quite known at the time in the clubs that the girls were to stay away from Freddie Mills. So he said, so what happened, Freddie Mills came to them and said that would they put a hit out on him. He didn't want to know when and where and how. He gave them, apparently, Reg said it was about £2,000, which apparently is quite a lot of money in the day, for it, and it was all set up. So I said, so what went on here? And he said, well, what happened when he was having sex with these girls, he ended up strangling them. What? 6 of them.
6?
6 of them, right? The police, obviously, because it then became a massive murder case, and then Reg told me what actually happened within the procedure of what Fred did, which I will keep off camera because this is in police files. This is cold case stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it needs just to go there because what the Reg and One wanted to do was to allow these 6 young women to have some peace of mind, knowing that their deaths have been reported, that
something is there to happen.
Yeah,
I suppose,
something could still open this case up, and that where now there is DNA, where there wasn't back then, it all can be proven that it was Freddie Mills. And I said, and you're right on this? And he went, oh yeah. So Freddie Mills literally murdered these 6 women, did certain things to them that only I know, what I've been told, which will all be in police files. And what happened, the murder stopped as soon as the hit was done, and the police were after Freddie Mills, knowing it was him at the time. And that's the reason why, because Reg said to me, he asked us to take him out because he said he wasn't going to live the rest of his life in prison. Wouldn't do it.
Yeah, some people can't do it, can they?
Yeah.
No, definitely
so that
not.
was that. So that's one. There's a few others. The one to do with the rent boy was something else, and they were both involved in one of them.
Okay.
And whatever you will hear or know, Reg and Ron were invited to 2 paedophile rings. A lot of it went on in Ron's flat. The people that went in there were obviously all gay men and that. Yeah. And there is also stuff which they knew there was royal stuff here as well.
Really?
Yeah. And to do with even the stuff that had gone on with Christine Keeler, and Stephen Ward went into Ron's flat, and it seemed to be a state of affairs where they were invited to go into these rings, and Reg said they never went. He said because we wouldn't touch children. And I went, okay. So then I asked him a question. I said, Reg, how old are the rent boys? And he said to me, well, they're 16. And I said, so you don't regard that as a kid then? And their attitude was, well, if they're going to put themselves in that position in life, then they deserve whatever they got. And we've had many discussions on that.
Yeah, I bet you have, yeah.
And he sees it, but I can also see the timeline they were sitting in and how it was looked at with these young men at the time, you know, these kids. So where it is, in the remorse of it, because I've said many times, do you have any remorse?
Yeah, that's the next question.
Right, with all of it. And again, I have to say this, that in doing what they've done, however big or deep, small it's ever been, no remorse, because you got to own it. And he said that was the one thing in the nick that kept him going. If you don't own it, you can't do a crime and then like collapse under it and
not do that physical time as well.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
So the strength of mind, of character of him, Ron is a little bit different, because Ron, in his mental health, he never visited it. So even when I would ask about George, you know, because he was in the pub and killed George, he'll say to me, did I do that? And I went, yes, you did, Ron. Do you remember? And he'll sit there and he'll go, I remember something, Susan, but that was so long ago.
Really?
Yeah. And so that's where I have to leave it. So Ron won't go into the stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is where Ron is with his mum, and that's the best place for Ron. Ron's got a long pathway, nothing like Reg. Reg has set sail to clear the decks for himself to be a better soul, roughly, better man, whatever, however you want to look at it. Can talk till the cows come home, I promise you that. And I will say one thing here. I know towards the end of his days, he remarried again, and he's told me so much about being and getting married and being with Roberta, his wife.
Yeah.
And I know that that also was orchestrated to come into his world to bring salvation, because whomever she is, because normally when I'm doing anything of any kind, especially if it's on a murder thing, it's always been for the victim, not on the murder side, the person who's done the deed, yeah? So where I sat with Reg, my first thing would be, I would go to his wife and say, your husband has come, I'm here to talk to you, do you want to talk to him, XYZ, yeah?
Gotcha, yeah.
And of course, for whatever the reasons are, he wouldn't do it. And I've said, Reg, just do this, I don't know where she is, I'll find her, let me do it, you can talk to your wife. No, leave it alone. And that's where we're gone. So I can only go with what he's wanted and what he's told me. And I know he loves her. I don't know what sits there. He's not let me in on any of that. Okay. But on all of what this man is now, and still standing, because he is, the strength of mind and character of living through those years in the prison is definitely made an awesome soul, because these are things he's taught me for myself of how to survive in life, where I would never have ever wanted to have been around anyone in this sort of calibre to give me information, like for instance, if I have a down day, he'll wander in to kick me arse and to put my mind straight, because the life pattern is so short here and we take so much on board.
True. And
it's an impossible task, so you just have to deal with what's put in front of you. And that's how he got through every single day of living in those nicks.
And what a lovely little note to end on. Before we go though, where can people find you if they wanted to have a private reading or...
with a session with me, well, I've got a website, which is susandevere.com.
Yeah.
Or on social media, there's Facebook, there's Instagram, to whatever.
Just get in touch.
Yeah, get in touch, yeah.
So you're still doing all the obviously
I do the individual stuff, yeah.
Excellent.
The bigger stuff, everything else in between.
Well, I might have to come back again another time. But thank you very much for your time, Reg, Ronnie, thank you. It's been a wonderful experience. It has been a very, very intense, interesting little podcast. And I can't thank you enough, Susan.
You're welcome, darling.
We hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much, Susan Devere.
Thank you.